Today, we're breaking down yet another Broncos loss. There was the ripping of chains, a sideline brawl, and a Trevor Simeon resurgence. We're going to break it all down. You are listening to the Huddle Up Podcast.
Welcome to the Huddle Up Podcast, your go-to show for all things Broncos.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast presented by Mile High Huddle. It's time to drop some knowledge. Before you go jumping off the cliff on this 7-game losing streak, just think about how boring life is without football, without Broncos football to watch. Hey, things aren't going good. The Broncos are losing games, but at least we have football to watch, to analyze, to enjoy, to entertain us. Keep some perspective out there. I'm Chad Jensen, Scout Media, CBS Sports Digital. With me, as always, my partner, Will Keys, editor and writer at Mile High Huddle. Will, I have a question for you, sir. Is it possible that all of the karma credit, let's call it, the football karma, that the Broncos were given by the football gods back in 2011 with the miraculous Tebow season, that bill has finally come due with some interest on it? Could that explain this 2017 debacle?
Well, the way I like to think about it and the timeline for the whole thing is 2011 was actually a karma repayment for the year before, 2010, and even if you want to go back to 2009, basically the whole Josh McDaniels era. I think we were owed some karma by the football gods. So now I think we're in debt from the 2015 season, and then we started to pay it off a little bit at the end of the 2016 season, and now we're basically just forking it over, and we're really taking it on the chin. So, hopefully, if you subscribe to this ludicrous theory, we'll win a lot of 3-point games in 2018, but we'll see.
There you go. 2015 was miraculous in its own right. I mean, there were so many games that year the Broncos probably shouldn't have won, but they found a way to get it done. And therein separates the type of mindset between that team, the 2015 team, and their counterparts this year, is that when the chips were down, that team found a way to win. This time, the Broncos this year can't even find a way to put themselves in a position where they have a chance to win. This game was an exception. There was a chance there at the end. If they could get a third down stop, we're going to talk about it. But, 2015 was also replete with many miracles, including Peyton Manning coming back late in the year and into the playoffs to lead them to a third world championship. So the Broncos, hey, this season's off the rails, Will, but Broncos fans, you know what? You still have a lot to be grateful for in that sense that it was just 2 short years ago your team brought home a world championship.
That's right. It's the only thing getting me through the day at this point. Yeah,
it's keeping us afloat. And we're going to break down what took place on Week 12. But before we do, first, please understand this show is here to give you a deep dive on your favorite team, whether the Denver Broncos are winning, whether they're losing, getting blown out, getting shut out, etc. And we need your help. Make sure if you haven't done it, take some time, go to iTunes, go to Stitcher, leave a creative review. Make sure you rate the show. Helps us out tremendously. Also, make sure you're following us on Twitter at HuddleUpPod. Let me tell you something. This is really bizarre. We have thousands of listeners to this show each and every episode, but we have exactly 403 followers on Twitter. You guys, for those of you who are subscribing and listening to this show, but you haven't followed us on Twitter, please take care of that. Now, look, there's 5 games left in the season. Who knows what's going to happen? But make sure you are subscribing to the show because we're going to have a lot to talk about, obviously. Change is probably in the air, and you're not going to want to miss a single episode. Now, again, a lot to get to today, but first, we want to say thank you to our sponsor, Rep the Squad, and draw your attention to one of the coolest services for a Broncos fan out there. Rep the Squad is a jersey subscription club that lets you rep your favorite jersey anytime you want. With hundreds of jerseys, Rep the Squad actually lets you switch between your favorite stars and styles, whether it's away, home, alternate, whenever you like. Adult memberships are $19.95 per month, and youth are $16.95. New jerseys, they arrive each and every week or whenever you order them, fresh and clean, within 2 to 3 days of ordering. It's kind of like Netflix for jerseys. Rep the Squad allows you to rep the Orange Crush all season long, no matter if it's home or away. Free shipping both ways. You can cancel anytime. Just remember, use promotion code HUDDLE, that's HUDDLE, to get 50% off your first month at repthesquad.com. That's promo code HUDDLE at repthesquad.com. All right, so here we are again, 7th straight loss. I learned today, Will, we're tracking this on Sunday, I learned that it has been 50 years, half a century, since your Denver Broncos lost 7 games in a row. Think about the historical scope of that achievement. I mean, ignominious as it may be, 50 years, Will, it took for the Broncos to go through the roller coaster of an NFL franchise, the ups, the downs, and now the downs being so low that they have set a new precedent 5 decades in the making. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the things that have happened just since 1967. You know, man has walked on the moon for the first time since the Broncos, since the last time the Broncos won, or lost, I should say, 7 straight games. So I think the historical perspective serves only to make us feel worse about where we are in the present.
Well, listen, this thing, we're going to feel even more worse, I think, before this thing gets any better. So let's all acquaint ourselves dilly-dilly with the misery, right? Let's just come to terms with it. Let's embrace it. Let's wrap our arms around it. And just, you know what, we're living in it now, and there's no use being in denial. And the cool thing about football, the cool thing about the Denver Broncos is, as bad as it is now, before we know it, the season's going to be over. We're going to be wishing we had football to watch and talk about and break down. We're going to be breaking down the draft. We're going to be previewing prospects, scouting, doing all that stuff. It's going to be a great offseason. Free agency especially is going to be crazy for the Broncos in 2018. So we have that to look forward to. But that's kicking the ball a little bit too far down the road for now. Let's focus on what happened, since this is the gut reaction episode, in Week 12 at the Black Hole. And let's start with Paxton Lynch, Will. Of course, finally tapped to start what was his 3rd career start in his short career. And honestly, you know, it was a little sketchy, but it looked for a time like things might actually start clicking. You know, he had a nice throw, big pickup to Andy Janovich that was called back for a holding penalty on Mr. Alan Barber. Barber had 2 holding penalties on the day. He just can't do anything right. But the offense was looking pretty good. Shaq Barrett got that strip sack, recovered the fumble in a very Von Miller-esque type of play. The Broncos were in business deep in Oakland territory. Lynch hits Devontae Booker on that nice wheel route. Great throw. Booker hauls it in. They call it a touchdown, only to then reverse the call, put it on whatever it was, like the half-yard line. First down, They bring in Dematopeko to serve as the fullback, and they get stuffed. Second down, just like the announcers called it. It's pretty common in terms of percentages that on second goal or second and short, you're usually going to take that opportunity to throw and make a gash play or try and score. And that's exactly what the Broncos did. Paxton Lynch rolls left, and that's when I felt my guts beginning to sink, Will. I knew this does not bode well. He throws through some traffic, hits Virgil Green in the hands, and about simultaneously the defender also contacts the ball, pops up, and into the hands of Navarro Bowman, who's laying on his back in the end zone. And it illustrates, Will, literally how slave the Denver Broncos are this year to Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong in any given situation, it will go wrong for this Denver Broncos team. And you could just see Paxton Lynch from there went into a shell, and he never really recovered before he got hurt. And we'll talk what happened beyond that. But first and foremost, your thoughts, Will, on Paxton Lynch's 3rd start. He made it through about 2.5 quarters before suffering what could be a pretty severe ankle injury and having to leave the game.
Well, first of all, it's crazy that now in 2 straight weeks the Broncos have been knocking on the door to take the lead 7-0, and they turn the ball over in the end zone. You know, last week it's the
slant.
Brock Osweiler, slant that gets picked off by Drake Kirkpatrick, goes the other way, and he nearly takes it to the house, and he probably should have if he doesn't cough up the ball and recover his own fumble at the 1. This time, the decision-making, I think, not great on the part of Paxton Lynch on that throw, but, you know, he put the ball right in Virgil Green's breadbasket. So,
Agreed.
Not a great decision to fire it into triple coverage, I think, that close to the end zone. But at the same time, when the ball hits you right in the chest, you got to catch it no matter how fast it's coming.
You know what? I would have liked to have seen him just tuck the ball and use that size to try and pick up a rushing touchdown. I mean, I saw him. You go back and watch the tape on Paxton Lynch at Memphis. He was doing stuff like that all the time. A lot of design runs in the same way that you'll see like Cam Newton do, dives, literally quarterback dives up the gut, draws, stuff like that. But in this case, Paxton Lynch rolling out, I mean, there was traffic there. He would have had to fight for it, but I think he could have punched the ball in if he would have had a little bit of moxie. And again, ill-advised maybe I agree with you, to try and fit it in there. But I think Virgil Green should have caught that ball. And I got a little pushback on that on Twitter. But that's a ball, that's a pass Virgil Green has to catch. And again, it just illustrates how the Murphy's Law aspect of this Denver Broncos season.
Yeah, and first of all, I don't know how much I agree with rolling a young right-handed quarterback to his left to throw the ball away from his body. I think if it's a design run, that's a different story. But if you're meaning to actually throw the ball in a bootleg, then make it simple for him and roll him out to his right, just so it's natural for him. Just
like that play in Tampa Bay, his first career touchdown pass to Emmanuel Sanders, something like that.
Yep. Yeah, no, a play like that would have been perfect. But I think more importantly, if you have the ball at the 1, like they did after that Devontae Booker reception, and you have a 6'7" quarterback, which they do for the second straight week, albeit a different one,
and a physical, athletic one,
right? Probably more so than Brock Osweiler. Why don't you just run a quarterback sneak? Just every time you're inside the 1 yard line, just snap it to him from under center, and then just tell him go forward. I think you're going to have a touchdown.
I honestly can't remember. I think Tim Tebow was the last quarterback to actually do one of those in a Broncos uniform. Actually just, whatever it is, short yardage, snap the ball, and fall forward, keep your legs driving, and pick up the yardage. I think it's been that long. And granted, Peyton Manning with the neck thing, you didn't want to put him in that kind of situation. I get that. But we've never seen that with Trevor. We've never seen it with Brock. And up to this point, of course, we haven't seen it with Paxton.
Well, I mean, we saw it with Brock a few times back in 2015, and it worked pretty well, so I'm surprised they didn't do it more.
I don't remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I think a little bit earlier in his stint. But, there's a reason Tom Brady does it so often. It's because it works. It's like a cheat code on 3rd and inches or 4th and inches. It's basically, there's really, other than just knowing that it's coming and pushing the center back and the guards as well.
Yeah.
There's really no defending against it. And given that, Paxton Lynch and Brock Osweiler are both 6'7", it makes it all the more easy to just, put your arms up and you're in the end zone for a touchdown. You barely have to move your feet if you're those guys. So I don't know. It just seems like they're trying to outsmart themselves. And I think that's kind of been one of the themes of the 2017 season from a coaching perspective.
And then it's another case of events snowballing, right? Where something goes wrong in the end zone, a touchdown gets taken off the board, interception, sudden change. And we've seen this with the Denver Broncos through these 7 losses, and each and every one. Broncos have a sudden change. Well, let's call it what it is. The Broncos turn the ball over, right? Unexpectedly or in a critical situation. The Broncos defense suddenly put back out on the field, and they just aren't the same unit. The Broncos, after that interception, relinquished touchdown scoring drives on Oakland's next 2 possessions. And before you knew it, Oakland was up 14-0. And if this season has taught us anything else beyond the whole Murphy's Law thing, that is that if the margin gets to 2 scores with this team, that's all she wrote. And it's just bizarre to me. I mean, we'll talk more about the Talib thing here in a little bit, but I don't want to go into that quite yet. But this team took the field with you could feel the intensity. This Broncos team was ready to rock and roll in Oakland, but all it took, Will, was that one thing going wrong, and the snowball's going downhill, and there's no stopping it. Why do you think that is? Why can't this team recover from adversity like that, especially early in games?
That's a great question. I mean, maybe it's a lack of veteran leadership. They don't have guys like DeMarcus Ware, and I hate to be the guy that brings it up, but TJ Ward, who can kind of calm guys down after a quick score and right the ship pretty early. They don't really have it on offense anymore. Obviously, with no Peyton Manning, I don't think Von Miller or C.J. Anderson or DT or Emmanuel Sanders are those guys. So, maybe it's that, or maybe it's leadership from the head coaching spot. Because Gary Kubiak, who's a pretty even-handed guy, but that works to your advantage when you're down 7-0.
And his players always fought hard for Gary Kubiak. I mean,
absolutely.
Even when the scheme was going sideways and there was a dearth of talent, obviously at certain position groups, the Denver Broncos in his 2 seasons as head coach always fought to the bitter frickin' end for Gary Kubiak.
Yeah, no, Gary Kubiak's a classic example of speaking softly but carrying a big stick, because he's got the, 4 Super Bowl rings, one with the 49ers and then all 3 with the Broncos.
That's right, yep. Plus,
playing in the league, all the coaching experience, basically been at every level of the organization. And he's just a really agreeable guy, and we just haven't seen that, I don't think, out of Vance Joseph yet at this point, and that's something that we'll get into later, obviously, with news that's coming down the wire, potentially. Yep. Allegedly, I'll slap the allegedly tag on all of that. But it's hard when there's not really any sure leadership at the top of the ladder, and there's a sense of panic maybe, or just chaos or disorganization even after you're down 7-0 and things aren't going according to plan. If the guy at the top of the food chain is panicking, then you better believe that the guys at the bottom are going to be too. So
yeah, definitely.
That's kind of where we are right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things with Vance Joseph, and you can chalk it up to his inexperience as a head coach, his inexperience even as a coordinator, only 1 year as a defensive coordinator in the NFL last year. His inexperience in that sense, whatever it is, the message he is trying to preach to his team, they're not fighting for their head coach. Maybe they don't like Vance Joseph. I don't know. Whatever it is, he is not resonating in the locker room, and eventually there's going to have to be a reckoning for that. And again, we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But before we move on, let's talk about Lynch gets hurt, pulls up lame, rolling right, and it was a non-contact injury. Bummer for him. He was on the sideline balling. People were teammates, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, consoling him. Unfortunate for him. My heart went out to him a little bit, just a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. I mean, he just hasn't had – the stars just frankly have not aligned for this poor SOB in the NFL. But nonetheless, Trevor Simeon warms up, takes the field. It's a quick 3-and-out. He goes 0-3, and you were on the Twitter account at Mile High Huddle. It's like, well, here we go. The offense basically just continues down the trajectory that it had been with Lynch.
Yeah, they didn't skip a beat.
They didn't skip a beat, but then on the next 2 possessions, the offense completely just opens up. Simeon drives them down, 2 consecutive touchdown scoring drives, and this margin gets narrowed to a single score. And we're going to talk about what happened in that final possession a little bit later, the final Oakland possession, and how the game basically, the dagger, if you will. But Simeon looked good, and it was one of those things where, let's face it, the Oakland Raiders defense, one of the worst in the NFL. I mean, that's why it made it so hard to swallow that the Broncos weren't able to pick up, some yards with Lynch under center and move the football on the ground. And the Raiders hadn't had a single interception all year. And of course, if there's going to be a team that's going to help them break that streak, it's going to be the Denver Broncos, and that's exactly what happened. But Simeon was able to expose and capitalize and exploit some of those weaknesses, especially in the Oakland secondary, and it really was impressive. I mean, it's nothing that's going to change the paradigm, don't get me wrong. It's not like, oh, no, this changes everything in terms of the future and the ramifications post-2017, but you got to hand it to the kid. Trevor Simeon came in. Paxton Lynch got all the first-team reps all week long. It was all about structuring a game plan for Paxton Lynch, putting him in the best position to succeed. And Trevor Simeon came in there, a little bit of a rocky start, but then, man, he put that thing into, from first to fourth gear, or whatever you want to say, in no time flat, and you got to tip your hat to the kid.
Yeah, I mean, you always talk about trying to insert a backup quarterback to get a spark. And I think putting Trevor Simeon back in, and not by choice, obviously, Paxton Lynch was hurt, but that was kind of the spark that you've been talking about all along. And who knows how long it lasts. And obviously we don't know anything about the future from week to week as far as who's starting at quarterback, but he looked like a professional quarterback. Maybe the play calling was, I don't know, it opened up a little bit more, down 3 scores, as it should.
A lot more spread, a lot more shotgun, but conversely, the Raiders were playing a lot more of a prevent type of cloud defense.
Right. But he was throwing the ball with really good touch, and he was making good decisions, I think, for the most part. Had a couple of dropped interceptions, I think, or just bad decisions. But that's going to happen, and that comes with a little rust. I can't even remember the last time he played. It had to be like a month ago at this point. So he came in, and
Chiefs
maybe the Chiefs game. Maybe all of that time on the bench did him some good. And you like to think that that's the reason that you sit players down, is so they'll learn from their mistakes and they get a little more time to think about what they've done wrong and how they correct it. And then
even
next time they get out there, yeah.
Joseph talked about that when the decision was made, that sometimes it helps, especially young quarterbacks, to take a step back, sit on the bench, and observe for a while. Excuse me, and it helps to give them new perspective on, as you say, where they went wrong, things they can do better. And even Brock Osweiler talked about it for whatever it's worth, and it seems that Trevor Simeon was able to take that opportunity to grow a little bit, learn from learn some lessons. Yeah,
that's really why that's why the bench is there. It's not to punish players, it's to learn and to have them rehabilitate themselves as football players and get back out there and hopefully be better than they were before. And so I think that was the case with Trevor Simeon. We should also point out too that the conditions in Oakland, especially in the second half, were really, really bad. And it's a bad field to begin with, and it's not ideal football playing conditions by any stretch of the imagination, but it was really pouring in Northern California today. So not a great place to really just play quarterback at a high level.
And to a passing game.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think you have to keep that in mind with Lynch. And I think with the hindsight being 2020, you have to consider, well, I don't know if playing Paxton Lynch on the road after 6 straight losses and given all this, I don't know. Maybe that wasn't a great situation for him, and with the weather and everything. But Trevor Simeon seemed to put it all together, and despite the pouring rain, got a pretty good grip on the football and made some nice passes to get the Broncos back in the game to the point where they're a third down stop away from having a chance to tie it up late in the fourth quarter.
Well, I think the issue with Lynch is, speaking for myself, I never thought at this point that inserting Paxton Lynch was the type of thing. It was different than with Brock Osweiler. At that point, I was like, you know what? You need to make a change for the sake of making a change. Try and find a spark some way, somehow. This was different. This was about, look, the last loss, this previous loss to Cincinnati, that's when the season really, that's when you knew. I mean, mathematically, Denver's chances of making the playoffs were reduced to like 2%. So at that point, it had to be about evaluation, has to be about, sure, you're going to go into each game trying to win the dang thing, but you need to know what you have in this first-round pick who's languished on the sideline. But now, unfortunately, the kid's in a boot. He's in a protective boot, which makes his availability for Week 13 very much in doubt, which likely leads to a coaching staff having to decide again between Brock Osweiler and Trevor Simeon. And based on the spark Simeon gave this offense at the end of, in the fourth quarter in Week 12, I have a hard time believing they're going to go back to Brock Osweiler. And, we still have a lot to get to. But first, we want to say thank you to our sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Morty, M-O-R-T-Y, the newest and smartest way to get a home mortgage. If you've ever bought a home, you know that the mortgage process can be some of the most confusing and painful hours of your life. Take it from me as somebody who has gone through the process of purchasing a home and taking out a home mortgage. It can be consuming, confusing, it can be painful. But Morty makes it easy. They make it fast. Not only does Morty simplify the process, but they help you find the smartest mortgage that's right for you. Just input your information into Morty's secure website, and in less time than it takes to hear this ad, you can shop qualified rates from different lenders. With Morty, you'll get real loan options in minutes without ever being called or sold to by a mortgage broker. And By shopping loans from different lenders, you're able to pick the rate and the term that best fits your needs. In addition to that, Morty can automatically generate a pre-approval letter online for you in minutes, which will help you speed up the home buying process and talk confidently to realtors and sellers. Morty wants to save you money. At Morty, there's no commission salespeople, so their experts exist solely to get you the best deal possible. If you ever get stuck or have questions, someone from Morty's team is always ready to assist you over real-time chat or on the phone. So whether you're a first-time home buyer, whether you're looking to refinance or buying an investment property, head over to trymorty.com/huddle to get started today. That's TRYMORTY, trymorty.com/huddle. Morty Inc. is a licensed mortgage broker, equal housing lender, NMIS consumeraccess.org, number 1429243. All right, well, let's talk about the Aqib Talib, Michael Crabtree chain incident part 2. Of course, Chris Harris Jr. Now, we've seen this many times. Aqib Talib, this is the one thing that I'll tip my hat to him. He will back up. I mean, he has every guy on his squad back, hands down. If you do something wrong, you do something that's off the beaten path, that's wrong, you're crossing the line on one of Talib's teammates, he will take exception to that in some form. Now, one thing I've learned is that especially if it involves Chris Harris Jr., his partner in the no-fly zone, they've been to a couple Pro Bowls together, a couple All-Pro teams, and they played in college together. He's like a little brother to Aqib Talib. If the onus is on Chris Harris Jr. in that sense, Aqib Talib is going to retaliate, and we saw that happen, unfortunately, in Oakland in the first quarter, where if you go back and watch the tape, what happens is you see Michael Crabtree on the previous play kind of get a cheap shot in on Chris Harris Jr. on a running play where Harris wasn't really around the point of attack. Harris goes down, very animated, gesticulating all the way to the sideline as the trainers are helping him off. As I was watching the game, I said to my mom, we're watching this together actually on television. I turned to her and I said, now watch Aqib Talib at the top of the screen. He's going to retaliate. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. All of a sudden, the ball, I felt like Nostradamus in that sense. But anyway, what happens? Well, they get locked up at the top of the route, and they're, kind of locked up going at it. And then Talib reaches in and yanks that gold chain again. Boom, and down to the ground. He takes, Crabtree takes him to the ground. Sideline brawl ensues. It was absolutely ridiculous. Long story short, Aqib Talib and Michael Crabtree ejected from the game, and then Gabe Jackson, their starting right guard, who plays at pretty much a Pro Bowl level, one of the better guards in the NFL, happens to get caught in a little bit of some crossfire, kind of runs in. This is my interpretation watching the replay of what happened. I don't think he meant to push that official to the ground, but nonetheless, he contacted an official, went to the ground, so he too was ejected. So you got 3 of the best players on both teams ejected from the game. And unfortunately, it cost for the Broncos. Talib's absence really contributed, significantly to this team's loss because Brendan Langley came in, and immediately Derek Carr, being a savvy, talented veteran, immediately starts to target the rookie. That's what they do. You look for the hole in the boat, and Langley was it. He was exploited several times, especially in the red zone. He had that big pass interference call to put the ball in the one, and he just, this is what's going to happen. They released Lorenzo Doss earlier in the week for being late to Thanksgiving, a meeting on Thanksgiving Day, which, by the way, for those who didn't know, that was like the 12th time this season he'd been late to either a meeting or a practice. So the Broncos had enough, sent a message, but nonetheless, that left Brendan Langley as cornerback number 4. He gets inserted, and that's all she wrote. If you look at that final possession, where the Broncos just needed one stop, and they could get a red-hot Trevor Simeon the ball back with an opportunity just under 2 minutes to, no timeouts granted, but an opportunity to drive the offense down and try and tie the game up. But on 3rd and long, they call a cover 0, playing man coverage. There's no safety help over the top. And what does Carr do? He just finds the guy that is lined up against Langley, drops it over the bucket, first down, game over. So you have to, I want to talk about Vance Joseph's thoughts on the issue here in a second, but before we do, Will, I myself, it's funny to see that Aqib Talib basically posterized Crabtree once again. It's going to be another meme that's going to exist for infinity. But is that really worth your team losing the game? Is it really worth it? My answer is no. What were your thoughts on Aqib Talib getting that chain, getting ejected again?
I mean, I would probably agree with you if the Broncos were 7-3 and not 3-7 at this point. So it's hard to just get. I don't know. I don't think anybody's like super emotionally invested at this point, knowing that the season's over. Just winning and losing from week to week.
Isn't that part of the problem, though? I mean, isn't contributing
to
that inferno now?
I mean, it's a different. You obviously want the team to be winning or to be thinking about winning and trying to win every game. But at this point, I think from an outside perspective, people aren't really as concerned with the wins and losses as they are the process and how things are going. Because after you lose 6 games in a row, you just want to see improvement. And improvement in this case would have been a win, but they didn't get it done. And for Talib, I don't know. I mean, you like to see a guy defending his partner in crime in Chris Harris Jr. And you like to see Aqib Talib be Aqib Talib, and to some extent, you have to take the good with the bad. And obviously, this is one of the more lighthearted things, not in the sense of getting kicked out, but just grabbing Michael Crabtree's
not shooting
train.
Yourself in the leg.
Yeah, not poking anybody's eye out or anything, or not, you and your brother getting arrested in Dallas or anything, but just kind of grabbing Crabtree's chain again and repeating exactly what happened last year. Yeah. To some extent, you have to find the humor in that.
Oh yeah,
and it's all in good fun.
It's definitely fun. I mean, it'll be a meme from now until eternity.
Oh yeah, no, it's now when people, I love it too, because when you think of Michael Crabtree, what's the first thing you think about? It's not like you don't think about his days at Texas Tech anymore, or the fade route in the Super Bowl that he almost caught to win the whole game. Mm-hmm. No, it's Aqib Talib just thoroughly emasculating him on national television
twice.
Twice, and just grabbing the chain from right around his neck. So that's a good memory to hold on to. And I think in times like these, we have to latch on to the good and kind of toss the bad aside. And in this case, we have to be happy that Aqib Talib stood up for his teammate, because I mean, wouldn't you have been a little discouraged to just see, apathy on the part of Aqib Talib?
My thing would be do it between the whistles. Now, if it
I guess. I don't know. I think Crabtree kind of instigated it too. We don't know what was said either.
Well, sure. But what I'm saying is do it within the rules and realm of the game, because if this was a situation where it didn't lead directly to a loss. I mean, you can go back. Now, once we get the All-22, the coaches film, we can go back and watch exactly Brendan Langley's snaps and how he was picked apart. It'll tell and reveal even more of this story. But without Aqib Talib on the field, contributed to 2, I'm just thinking in my memory, I'm not going over notes, 2 of Oakland's 3 touchdowns, and then that big conversion to put the dagger in. I mean, that was literally it. Aqib Talib, now who knows? If he's in the game, maybe they still manage to convert on that big third down especially. Who knows? But my gut tells me the ball goes elsewhere on that play if Aqib Talib is on the field. So if it hadn't led directly to a loss, okay, maybe I'd feel a little bit different. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly funny. I agree with you. I mean, we were all laughing about it on Twitter as I was typing up a piece to show viewers who couldn't watch the game, the actual video of what happened. I was laughing about it. I mean, it was funny, but at the same time, you have to think about individuals doing selfish things that cost the team. And in fact, that kind of leads us to what Vance Joseph had to say after the game, very dejected. I mean, this is a guy who is at the lowest of the low. If I feel for anybody right now, I feel for Vance Joseph. Here's what he had to say, his thoughts real quick on Talib getting ejected from the game.
I don't like it. And it's unacceptable. We can't lose our best players because of a personal battle. That's a personal battle. This is about the Broncos, so it's unacceptable. We can't have it. It's non-negotiable. And obviously losing one of our best players and playing a young guy, it hurt us tonight. So we can't have it. We talk about those things all the time, and we can't have them. Unacceptable. Well, we'll see. I didn't see the whole play. Right now I'm dealing with the result of what happened. And, both teams lost two of their best players. It's nonsense. It's silly. So I don't know what exactly happened, but I know it can't happen, to our football team especially.
All right, Will, so that's how Vance Joseph feels. In a nutshell, that's how I feel. And with the Broncos team now coming off their 7th loss, what do you say to, if you're a teammate of Aqib Talib, what do you say? Do you say thank you for having, one of our guys, one of our brothers' backs, or do you call him out maybe for being selfish and doing something at an individual level that hurt the team on a macro level?
Maybe so. And I like that Vance Joseph took that position, that it was a selfish thing, because as the leader, obviously you can't condone that. And you do understand that Aqib Talib is Aqib Talib, and he's not a button-down guy, and he's going to wear his emotions on his sleeve, and that's kind of part of what makes him great. And, he is a little bit of a wild card, but to some extent you want to have, on a perfect team, you have a guy like that who is, prone to do kind of explosive things, both good and bad, both, as a football player and just as a human being, I should say on the field, stuff like that.
Right. Obviously,
you don't want players getting in trouble off the field, but, you got to have kind of like that crazy, Bill Romanowski guy that just kind of keeps your team, on its toes a little bit. And I think Aqib Talib, when things are going well for the Broncos, is a really valuable part of the locker room just to, keep spirits up.
But
so
when things are going bad.
Right. Yeah. It seems a little tone deaf to kind of do that in the middle of a 7-game losing streak a little bit.
Right.
At the same time, you could say this would be way worse if this was a really meaningful game. And then I'd say, yeah, you have to be on the field for this game. It's a crucial AFC West divisional game on the road that the Broncos have to stay in the middle of the playoff race, but they're not. And so, you just kind of shrug it off and say, who knows if Aqib Talib will even be here next year or the year after. And so you kind of just look at, I don't know, this is how I looked at it, but, hey, this gives us a chance to look at Brendan Langley and see what we have, because remember, the Broncos spent a 3rd rounder on him, and we don't really think about Brendan Langley on that like that yet. But there's guys like DeMarcus Ware and Brendan Langley and Carlos Henderson who, Henderson's an exception just because he's out for the year, but we don't know what the Broncos have in them yet. And so this was kind of a wake up call that, well, Brendan Langley might need to work on some things.
Oh yeah,
because he got some live reps.
Terrible technique. His technique was just inconsistent and poor, especially in the second half. I mean, there are several plays where I was just biting my fist. I'm like, come on, dude. And it's an interesting topic, and we could probably talk about it for the rest of this episode. But there's other issues we need to break down here, including what Von Miller had to say after the game. Another sad sack at the podium, dejected. He was asked specifically, Von Miller, how he's taking this losing streak on a personal level. Here's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really sit up here and say I'm not, frustrated. Year 7 for me, I think it's, I deal. It's not. It is the losses. It's just where I am in my career right now. I feel like, this is the best shape that I've been in. I feel like, this is the smartest that I've been. I feel like, I'm on top of my game in all areas, and I just want an opportunity to go out there and prove that. And that's the frustrating part. That's the frustrating part. Me being in my prime and me being on top of my game like I've never been before, and not being able to, put it out there for, everybody to see. So wasting a prime year on, whatever we got. Yeah, that's the frustration. But, at the end of the day, we still got another opportunity to go out there and be great. And I've said, weeks before, that's all I really need is an opportunity to go out there with my guys and my teammates and just play. It's been stranger stuff happen. I just want to get out there and show the type of player I truly am.
All right, Will. So it might be that, in a sense, the Broncos are wasting a year of Von Miller's prime. But what I would say to Von Miller is play harder. Von, you want your team to win? Play harder. You're having a hard time swallowing a losing season in the midst of your prime? Play harder. That half sack was great. You had a couple of big-time plays on some rushing downs. But, dude, play harder. don't cry about it in the media. I know you were asked the question directly, but to me, it rubbed me wrong, Will, for this guy to stand up at the podium in the midst of a team just completely defeated and beaten in the midst of a historic losing streak and to say they're wasting a year of my prime. For me, especially his caliber and profile with the team, I mean, answer that question in a different way and don't make it sound, I don't know, so selfish. I'll be honest, I was a little bit disappointed in his response there.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, and this is the first losing season that Von Miller's ever had to go through in the NFL, assuming, of course, that they lose one more game and don't finish 8-8 miraculously. But right. I don't think there's any illusions about that happening.
We're not holding our breath.
Yeah, and you think about it, like he's either gone 9-7 or made the playoffs every year in his career, so it's a little different for him. But you have to realize, like, you're a guy with a Super Bowl MVP and a Defensive Rookie of the Year award,
multiple Pro Bowls.
Yeah, you basically you're a lock for the Pro Bowl every year.
$20 million a year.
Yeah, you're making an obscene amount of money to play outside linebacker in the NFL. And there's guys like Joe Thomas who have had like one winning season in their career, and he hasn't even made the playoffs ever. He's literally never. Yeah, he's never. He's never participated in a playoff football game ever. since I'm sure the last bowl game he played at Wisconsin. So when you think about it that way, Von Miller's had it pretty good. And obviously, if you have guys like him, you want to be winning every season. That's just not how life and sports work. Like, you're just gonna have bad years, both in football or basketball or baseball. Like, there's Kobe Bryant and the Lakers were really just terrible for about 3 years in the middle of his prime. And, obviously that's not a perfectly comparable situation, but there's just going to be down times when you're an athlete, and Von Miller hasn't experienced that yet. And I think it's new to him.
It is. And, in that sense, he's going through some uncharted territory. He's getting fielded questions that are in a vein that he's never had to deal with before. And I get that, but I just think he needs to be a little bit more controlled and measured in his response to questions like that, especially when the disappointment is so fresh and on the front of the mind. Now, let's go to another topic that is buzzing here on Sunday night as we track this gut reaction episode that has to do with Vance Joseph. In fact, when I was typing up the recap article at milehighhuddle.com, I said, who knows, after 7th straight loss, whose head is going to be next to roll. We've heard some rumblings that Vance Joseph could be on the chopping block, and it might be soon. He might not survive. Our very own Eric Trickle, who has a penchant for being right on these things. He's got some good sources, and I can vouch for that. They're not always right, as sources aren't always. Things don't always come to fruition, but I will give Eric this, that more often than not, what he is told does tend to come true. So in this case, here's what I want to discuss, Will, is not whether or not this is true, but rather, should the Broncos do something like this? So you've got 11 games in the books. You got 5 left to go. It doesn't seem as if change or progress is on the horizon. At a certain point, do you think the Broncos need to cut bait with this coaching staff, because they don't seem to have – Vance Joseph is at the top, so we'll leave it with him. He doesn't seem to have any kind of control on what's happening on the field, and the losses continue to pile up again at a historic level. Do the Broncos need to make a change, or is this just one of those things, Will, where they need to swallow it? They need to maybe ask some more difficult questions at a more, front office level, and obviously coaching has a little bit more of an immediate impact on what's happening on game day. I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around. That's what I'm trying to say. And should we look at it through that vein, or do we look at it in the sense that, look, regardless of all of the factors, blame-wise, that led to this point, arguably, this is my own opinion, arguably the most immediate influence on this situation, unfortunate situation that is presenting itself right now, is Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph right now, again, doesn't seem to have any kind of control on what's happening, and there's no positive anything on the horizon. In fact, it would not surprise me were the Broncos to lose every remaining game. Is this a conversation that should be had right now at Dove Valley, or at the very least, Will, is this something that should be tabled until 2018?
Yeah, no, you have to table it until at least the offseason. I don't think there's any justification outside of, like, I don't know, just like personal misconduct or something like that for firing a first-year head coach in the middle of his first season. I can't think of anything where a coach has been fired before he's reached his 16th game. Can you?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but with the rough and tumble production-based business that is the NFL, I would imagine that it's happened before. We probably should have researched that point, but at the same time, this is a unique situation that he's in that the Denver Broncos, the expectations that exist in Denver.
I mean,
that
is it really?
That kind of slants it, I think, a little bit.
I mean, I guess so, but like at some point, like the expectations have to meet reality, and the reality is that this was never, a Super Bowl contender, I don't think, before the season to begin with, and we kind of ignored. Well, yeah, but we ignored, a couple of elephants in the room, that the offensive line wasn't as good.
Quarterback situation sucked.
Yeah, the quarterback situation was, what the quarterback situation still is, not very good, and we didn't quite know how some of the free agency signings were going to go and how the rookie class was going to look, and that's still a mixed bag, obviously. But no, I don't think there's any justification football-wise for firing a newly signed head coach before he finishes out his first season. And even then, I don't think firing a head coach after one season is justified, save for like the Cam Camerons of the world who go 1-15 with the Dolphins, or
think about
stuff like
epic
that.
This failure has been. Let's just be optimistic.
Well, it's epic in the sense that the Broncos aren't used to having double-digit losses in the season, but it's not epic for the rest of the NFL.
Well, it's epic in the sense that the losing streak, yeah, you're going to have your doormats like the Cleveland Browns who go 0 for, pretty much every year with very few exceptions, maybe pull out 1 or 2 wins and all that. What I'm saying is for the Denver Broncos, through their lens and historical perspective and expectations, this is completely unlike anything, including the Josh McDaniels debacle, they have ever experienced. And John Elway is not a patient man. He's not a patient person. I don't know if I agree. You would say that Josh McDaniels' era, let's say just 2010, you would say 2010 matches or is worse than what we're going through right now?
Yeah, no, I think so. And a lot of that has to do with McDaniels. I'll always think that McDaniels was basically the worst plague that will ever be visited upon the Denver Broncos football franchise, just because he came in and his first order of business was to swiftly trade quarterback Jay Cutler, who I think was a fan favorite, certainly my favorite player in the NFL at the time. Yeah, coming off a Pro Bowl year, there really hadn't been a franchise quarterback in that city since John Elway, and he was the heir apparent. And he really looked like he was going to be the guy. And, all of that, not all of his, time in Chicago and now Miami notwithstanding, that's a terrible way to ingratiate yourself with a city and a franchise. And Vance Joseph, he did and said all the right things, and now it's just not working on the field in the last 7 weeks. And I don't think you can fire a guy for that. And I think it sends a bad message to future candidates to say,
that I won't debate. That I will not debate. I mean,
because who's going to
coaching candidates have to wonder if Denver's the place their careers go to die as a head coach. I mean, John Elway runs the risk of creating that perception if he fires Vance Joseph anytime between now and 2019.
Right. Well, I mean, and if they lose every game to finish out the season and then they fire him, I think that's a lot more acceptable. Granted, that it's not the norm in the NFL to fire a head coach barring abject disaster like 1-15 or 0-16 after one season.
Let me just throw this at you real quick.
Yeah.
Josh McDaniels, I'm looking at it myself because I don't have this from memory. I just pulled it up while you were talking there. But Josh McDaniels was fired after losing 5 straight games in 2010, of course, also coming off 2009, in which they started 6-0, but went on to just, I think they finished 8-8, if I recall right. Then go into 2010, from week 11 through week 15, they lost 5 straight games, and he was fired. So, to your point, though, there was a little bit more scope to the decision to fire him in that he had made so many big changes at an organizational level, getting rid
right.
of a budding franchise quarterback, and nobody liked him. I mean, everybody hated Josh McDaniels, at the player level and his fellow coaches, his staff. I mean, he was persona non grata, and so it made sense, especially in that sense, to finally just cut bait and reevaluate. John Elway comes in, saves the day, and here we are. What I would say is different this time is that the Broncos have now lost 7 games in a row, dating back 50 years, which is the worst ever. And the problem, Will, is that there's no empirical evidence, any kind of something you can point to that would give, if you're a front office and you're making decisions on how do we improve, what can we do, I mean, there's nothing there right now to point you in any way hopeful that Vance Joseph has the wherewithal to turn the ship around. Certainly not this year. And if it's this bad this year, what makes you think it's going to be any different next year?
Well, let me kind of contrast it by saying, and then I'll throw this in as well, is I think there's more reason to fire Josh McDaniels in the 2010 season just because of, of that cheating scandal back.
Right, that's true, yeah.
Back in that year, people kind of gloss over. That was a really embarrassing thing for the franchise and for Pat Bowlen especially. But think about, so the 49ers are 1-10 now, I believe. They're 1-10. The Broncos are 3-7. They're both really storied franchises, kind of two of the NFL's. 3-8, sorry. But yeah, the 49ers and the Broncos are two of the NFL's more model franchises, I would say, and obviously varied recent success. The Broncos have won more recently, and then the 49ers had, I think, like 3 kind of down years recently. But what's the difference between the optimism surrounding Kyle Shanahan and now all the pessimism surrounding Vance Joseph? And obviously there's a difference in the two rosters, but Vance Joseph has 2 more wins than Kyle Shanahan, and there's no talk about Kyle Shanahan losing his job. What do you think the reason for that is?
I think if you really boil it down, it's expectations. And if there's anything, and I've written about this many times over the last 7 weeks, that the Broncos fooled themselves into thinking along the way, the last 2 years basically, that they were one middle-of-the-road quarterback away from repeating the same history of 2015. And that has doomed them at so many levels. So back to your question, yes, as an organization, they fooled themselves into thinking that they were on the cutting edge of contention, that they were in 2017 with the talent they still had on defense, the changes they made on the offensive line, and Trevor Simeon going into his second year as a starter, that they were going to be in a position to contend in the AFC West and in the conference, and they were just flat out wrong. But those expectations, the problem is with John Elway being who he is, I don't see it changing. I don't see him suddenly going, yeah, well, every dog has its day. It's our turn to suck for a while. Let's rebuild this thing. No. In his mind, he doesn't have the patience, I don't think. He talks about win now and from now on, but I don't think in that sense he has the patience to endure the growing pains that it takes at times to weather the downside of this thing. Is it the right decision? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying that right now, Vance Joseph, if I'm the one making the decision, this is me. If I'm the one in the front office calling the shots, I'm not making any change as a head coach until the season's over. And then I'll go back and reevaluate the whole thing. And if I feel like it's best that we move on and find a new head coach, I'll do it. But I will at least agree with you on that, Will, that I don't think now is the time for Joseph's head to roll. Yeah, no, it would be pretty much, until we find out otherwise, it'd be basically unprecedented to fire a coach before he finishes up his first season. And we should note that Bobby Petrino didn't finish his first season in 2007, but he left kind of near the end of that season, on his own accord to go coach Louisville. So that's kind of a different situation. But yeah, no, I don't think it sets a good example, I think, for future candidates. If you are definitely looking out to
to pick up a more established guy who's maybe been in some situations in the NFL as a head coach before and kind of knows the ropes, to say, well, I'm coaching for my job every week. And it's kind of the joke that people have on Twitter about Brad Stevens, about how Indiana wants to get him, and so they say that Brad Stevens, even though he's coaching the best team in the East in the NBA, that he's coaching for his job every week. But
Right.
that's kind of what it is to be a Broncos head coach since 2014 with John Fox.
Yeah.
To say that like nothing's good enough unless you're coming home with a Lombardi, and
Well,
even then, you could be on the way out a season later.
But let us not forget, John Elway did not want a coaching change in 2017. He did not want Gary Kubiak to quit. In fact, he tried multiple times to convince his old friend and roommate and teammate to stick around and let's just make some changes. Let's tweak this thing so that you're not as under pressure as you are, and let's keep you around. But Kub just wasn't. He was done. He was done at that level. So
Yeah.
It's not like John Elway wanted this. But so if we're going to compare, we got to compare John Fox, the parting of ways after 4 consecutive winning seasons or whatever it was. Yeah, 4. Well, not winning seasons, but 4 playoff seasons. So John Fox, and then now this situation. But again, where I'll say that this has a totally different complexion, well, is just simply with how bad the season has been. I mean, it's not like they're just failing to, perform and they're losing
Right.
out in just a couple of plays here and there. I mean, we're talking about not only a 7-game losing streak, but blowouts, shutouts, embarrassments at home. It's just like, I mean, the comedy of errors has been so extreme that I could understand why a guy like John Elway and a president like Joe Ellis could feel compelled to consider making a change. It's just because of how bad it's really been, the scale of it.
Yeah. I think that's a fair thing to consider, but only until the season's over. So, and then if they decide to pull the trigger on it, then, I think that's their call, and hopefully it works out. But I think it's obviously wrong to do it, 11 games in. But we'll see what they do.
Absolutely. Well, we're running out of time, but before we get out of here, let's take a quick peek inside the Mile High Mailbag, because Will and I are your football priests. We're here to offer answers and absolution to your burning Broncos questions. First one comes from Mile High Maniac, and we really are getting low on time, so let's rapid fire these bad boys. Mile High Maniac asks, does this end Lynch in Denver? Will,
I think it depends on the length and the severity of the injury. I think if he's healthy in like 2 weeks, I think you could see him out on the field. But if he's done for the year, I think they could just move on in the offseason and draft a guy, and you never see him again.
I agree. I honestly, whether it's severe or not, I don't think you might see him play if it's not too severe again. I doubt it. I think at this point the Broncos are, they're pretty fed up with Lynch. And I've heard some other things behind closed doors about how they feel about his prep habits and his work ethic and things like that. They're not too high on their first-round pick. And there was a report, of course, Monday before the game kicked from, I believe it was Mike Kliss, that he said the Broncos are looking to find a for-sure guy, a no-question starting quarterback in 2018. Now, to me, that means a veteran. They're going to go out on the free agent or the trade market and bring in a guy that is not only an unquestioned starter, no competitions in training camp, etc., but a guy who immediately can step in and raise all ships in the sense that Drew Brees could do, or just spitballing here, Phillip Rivers, possibly an Eli Manning, someone that's Kirk Cousins possibly, although I'm not too sold on him to be honest with you, but someone in that sense that's just a big splash. That's what Mike Kliss is reporting. If there's anyone, he's the closest guy to the team and anybody in the market. So there's that to keep in mind. Does this end the Lynch era in Denver? Not quite, but I'd be surprised if we honestly see him again, especially with how well Simeon played at the end of the fourth quarter. And lastly, we have a question here from @Zeb211. His question, he says, first of all, we must get rid of Trevor before our next QB, right? Draft a guy and actually give him the job and learn on the fly. This start and stop garbage does nobody any favors. So what he's saying is, before we bring in that next big guy, whether it's free agent in 2018 or drafting a guy in 2018, Simeon's got to be shown the door. Do you agree with that?
I don't think there's any reason for that. I think he proved today, especially, that he can be a really high-end backup in this league, and that's a really valuable commodity with the way injuries have been trending in the NFL, and especially this year. I think, you have to have a backup that knows the system, first of all, and Trevor Simeon's always going to be that guy. I think no matter where he is, he's going to have a good grasp on the playbook. Right. And he can come in a pinch, and he's down 21-0 and almost brings you back. So I think he basically has everything you want in a backup quarterback. And then, maybe if you put him in the right situation where everything's going on well around him and he has a running game and a defense, then he's obviously a low-end starter, but that's not the case in Denver anymore. But yeah, depending on the contract situation, he's a guy you want to keep around. I don't know why you'd show him, and I don't know why you have to show him the door.
The only reason you'd get rid of him is if you were going to stick with Paxton Lynch. That'd be my thing. If you were going to somehow stick with Lynch, then you probably just get rid of Trevor and get all that emotional baggage and history out the door. But if Trevor sticks around and they go out and make a splash in free agency or draft a high-round quarterback, it has to be, if Trevor sticks, it has to be, look, Trevor, you're the backup, period. We're not doing another open competition. If it's a first-round pick, look, here's what we're doing. We learn from our mistakes. We're investing fully in building around this young quarterback starting now. We're not going to have any of these contrived competitions. We're going straight with him. And as long as that precedent has been established and that understanding exists, absolutely you want Trevor Simeon because, again, as Will said, we saw today the value of having a capable backup in the NFL. And I think that's what Trevor Simeon, at the very least, has established himself as at this point in his career. And you know what? A guy like him can make a lot of hay in this league doing such things. Look at the money Matt Castle made. Look at the money Chase Daniel has made. So kudos to him. He's probably got a job in the NFL for 10 years. So we'll see. I wouldn't expect just out of the gates Trevor Simeon's going to be gone in 2018. But we're about out of time. But before we get out of here, we would be remiss if we didn't tell you about our sponsor, Audible. Get a free audiobook download, you guys, and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/huddleup. You get 180,000 different titles to choose from, whether you're on iPhone or Android or even Kindle or a basic MP3 player. You can listen to it while you're driving. You can listen while you're working out or doing yard work, cooking, whatever it might be. We don't always have the time to sit down and turn the pages on the books we want to read, but Audible gives us the opportunity to do so while we're multitasking. We get those books under our belt, and we're better off for it. So go to audibletrial.com/huddleup. Also, a phenomenal way to support the show. You want us to keep bringing you these episodes several times per week? We ask you humbly, patronize our sponsors. But that's all the time we have for today. You can find Will in the Twitterverse at WillKeys6, myself at Chad and Jensen. Will, did you have a good Thanksgiving, my friend?
Very good. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. It was a good holiday week, and I'm ready to get back to work. But tweet us your questions, everybody. We're always going to try to address your concerns on the show as often as we can. Look for Nick and Carl's preview of next week's game by Thursday. They're also going to continue to do their draft episodes, scouting the draft. We're focusing right now especially on quarterbacks. No surprise why, with Eric Trickle contributing quite a bit. So make sure you're subscribing, you guys. For Will, I'm Chad. We'll talk to you soon.
Mile High Huddle.